you very much. So I'm Ian Blackwell. I'm head of the Quantum Technologies team at EPSRC, and EPSRC is one of the partners in the national programme. And I realised actually as I gave this titled this, that I focused on research. And of course, what a lot of what I'll talk about here is actually also about the wider national programme, not all of which is research. But I think it's also important to remember that when we talk about the quantum technology research portfolio, it is in the context of both that wider national programme and the idea that we'll have a wider research innovation landscape over time. So it will not just remain an academic exercise. Now, I'd just ask you to hold that in your mind when I'm actually going through these slides. Now, I'm going to cover a few things. I'm just going to touch base with you and remind you of the national programme. I'll cover some of the industrial strategy and a recent exciting announcement and launch of a programme that we had just yesterday, I think, in fact, CDTs, and then I'll go on to the proposed second phase of the national programme and the future of the research programme in that. Now, I'm going to be a bit annoying now. Put your hands up if you've read the national strategy document. Right, okay. That's not enough hands. I'm being quite serious now. You should all be reading some of the documents about the national strategy. And the reason I say that is because if we want to continue to have funding in the UK in this area, it has to actually help contribute to the aims of this national strategy. Okay, so I think it's really useful to remember this. And this strategy is not particularly long, and it's a reasonable read. Actually highlights some of these things, namely a strong foundational capability, it goes to growing the skills workforce, etc. You can all read that fast and say it. But I think it's worth remembering that strategy because it's the context in everything from why we have hubs, why there's an ICF programme being launched, and why, for that matter, EPSRC has quantum technology required to its CDT core. This is what's driving the decisions around those. Now, this is the current programme. These are the sort of things we have. It's best probably described as a programme of programmes. It's quite highly coordinated, and it has multiple different elements. And also, I think, as an example of the first of its kind of work, it was a quantum programme that was centred both on civilian and defence outcomes. And that's quite different to programmes you see elsewhere in the world. There's a comment mentioned earlier, I can't think it was Andy that mentioned it about the programme, around the fact it's a programme that's actually building supply chains, it's trying to build an industry. So it's things like economic benefit. And those are other features of this programme that are quite unusual, or certainly were unusual when it was launched. And we're being copied. Okay, so we've got a lead, but we've been copied. And this is how the funding currently looks, as you can imagine from looking at these numbers. It's quite a large programme. It's probably the largest single investment the UK has made in an emerging technology in a very coordinated way. And multiple streams. And some of what I imagine many of you are aware of, things like the hubs that are shown here, fellowships and training awards and the like. I'd like just to try and hold in mind that picture, because that picture needs to change, I think, in terms of the balance between things. And the other side of this, I think it's worth also remembering, is that if this is funding just for what I might call quantum technologies and quantum science, it's worth remembering that there's an awful lot of funding that was happening outside of that over many years in different areas that both help this area progress, as well as the fundamental areas of science that it started from. But it goes back a long way, and I think the success of this programme is important both for what it will deliver in its own right, but also that it's a test case in the UK for how long-term investment over many years, often in quite fundamental areas, actually can lead to a major beneficial outcome for the UK. What we do here will affect what happens when we have the next thing that comes out of physics, or comes out of biology, or comes out of chemistry, in terms of how it's approached by governments. Now, how many of you read the BLACKIT report on quantum? Again, there should be more hands going up. Okay? If you see yourselves as actually being leaders in this field in the future, whether that's in academia or in industry, I really encourage you to start reading some of these documents. It doesn't take a long time, I'm sure. I know a lot of you are very busy, but you also will presumably spend quite a lot of time on planes, trains and automobiles. And certainly in 2 of those cases, you can do some reading. And it's not a long document again, but it highlights a really important recommendation. And I think a lot of what I'm going to present to you on the proposals for the second phase, and the things what's in the ICF, and for that matter, what the ideas of a refresh of the research programme, based on the fact that this recommendation was made. Okay, the current programme should continue. Implicitly, we should continue to have a major quantum technologies effort in the UK. Now, one development that's happened over the last year or so is the industrial strategy, and specifically the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. How many of you have actually looked on the web about the industrial strategy? Okay, just out of interest. I'm not going to berate you again, don't worry. So, a £20 million programme, Pioneer programme, has been launched. It had the opening day yesterday. This is focused around 4 key challenges: seeing the invisible, situational awareness, infrastructure productivity, trusted peer-to-peer communication. It's focused very much on the industrialisation of quantum technologies. It's not covering everything that's coming out of the programme so far. Okay? Lots of stuff isn't ready for this. It talks about coming up with prototype devices and services. Okay? And it's really about trying to establish actually the bigger industrial landscape, supply chain around quantum technologies. But it's quite exciting because it's moving the area, so some of the area, onto the next stage, I think. And it will in time bridge, I think, the first and hopefully second phase of this program. And there's a little bit more information here, and these slides will be shared, so please don't feel you need to start taking photos with you. This is primarily focused on industry consortia. And so a lot of the funding that will go out will go out for industry in those consortia. There are roles to play for academia, which I appreciate many of you come from here. There's a limit, I think 30% for the academic partners in any consortia. But I think for these projects to progress, actually, you can imagine many of them will want to engage with the academics that have been doing the work so far. So I draw your attention to some of these dates. I encourage you where you're approached or can see opportunities for consortia to form to pursue those options. And I don't know if Chris is hiding somewhere. If you want to say anything just quickly, Chris?
Not really, it's just the fact that the information is all available on the web. There's also a recording of the WebEx and the WebEx yesterday, that's some information. I'm here today and most tomorrow, so if you're interested.
And also I should add that Peter is our interim challenge director. Do you want to say Peter? Or
no, other than that what we're looking at is the formation of consortia that have to be industry-led, but with RTOs and research groups. And what we're looking at is, as you say, a total cost between 3 and 10 million. That's total project costs. That's not how much money we will put out, and there are rules on that. But looking at those 4, I could imagine the 4 key challenges. I can see that this will make a considerable difference for an industrially focused getting stuff out within the 3 years of the project. Chris is here, I'm here, and I'll be here till tomorrow. Happy to talk to anybody.
Thank you, Peter. So the other thing that's going on as well is Centres for Doctoral Training. I appreciate this call is live at present, so I think we can't go into the detail of who's put bids and things. But I think the reason I put this up is I think it's a major element actually of the national programme. This call's going through EPSRC at the moment, and the reason we've got that quantum technology part of it is because the need for skilled people to establish this area in the UK in the longer term, both in academia and industry, is really quite significant. It's paramount, I would say. Actually, so if we want to make this area stick in the UK, having the workforce, both in academia and industry, is going to be quite vital. Now, I'll come on to probably what many of you are quite interested in, I suspect, which is the proposal for a second phase of the national programme. So currently, the programme runs out formally in March 2019. Okay, so we're quite a way through the national programme. The hubs themselves have funding until around November. Certainly they're finished by November, from what I recall, November 2019. There's on the table at the moment, courtesy of a vision piece from Peter that went to Sir Mark Walport, and documentation to support that. A proposal for a multi-hundred million programme in similar in scale to where we are now. Still a multi-partner effort. The current programme has DSTL, NCSC, NPL, Innovate UK and EPSRC as part of UKRI, and KTN involved, and there's a number of stakeholders from academia in the form of hubs and capital awards, as well as industry. This second phase has to try and address recommendations of the Blackwell review that are pertinent to it. But importantly, what we need to see is an increased emphasis on what we might call innovation, and an increased participation from the private sector, less public funding as a share of the total. Again, it will be a suite of investment streams, but quite critically, it needs to build on that first phase. It has to be an evolution of that first phase, and deliver that national strategy that I talked about earlier. Now, I should say something now very clearly. None of this is guaranteed. We're still at this case in the situation of trying to secure this funding. But all I can share with you now is what our aspiration roughly looks like. I can't guarantee it, but this is how it's been described and how it's been thought about. The information on this table has been through both the delivery partners and the strategic advisory board, and is broadly what we think we want to do. Okay. And it includes various different streams of something coordination. There's a stream for research hubs, both capital here in the first couple of years, courtesy of an allocation that EPSRC will get, and then the allocation for resource. Innovation centres, capital again here, but also a resource stream, and training and skills, which will probably, I would predict, include both PhDs and also other forms of training. I think as the area develops, we can think of other types of training that might be needed, whether that's masters, or I'll leave you your own imagination as to what that might be. And challenge programmes of a similar model to the ISCF competition that I just described. And so you can see, so this is an overall programme picture. And the idea is that these investments would actually have to be linked up in various ways. They'd have a degree of interplay and areas of common working or and the like. But we have different types of stream going on. Now, one thing I think I should draw your attention to is this declining budget, particularly for researchers, which I'm going to talk in more detail about the process for it. And there are a couple of reasons for that. But one is, first and foremost, the capital situation. And the second is that I think it's worth thinking about. There might be targeted programmes in specific areas, but my own personal view is that there won't be a third phase. Not like this. It'll either be successful enough that it will become mainstream. So some of you will know that I used to look after the ICT theme at EPSRC. Every time EPSRC used to put its spending review bid in, as part of ASK UK, there'd always be a proportion for the ICT theme. In the same way there's always a proportion for physical sciences or mathematical sciences. There's a reason for that, is because it's got past the challenge of having to be given the benefit of the doubt. We don't have to make the case on the idea of a specific challenge in the way that quantum computing does. It's accepted that benefit is gained by having things that you will call responsive mode in ICT research or physical science. That's within that situation. The benefit has established itself, it's shown its promise, it's shown it can deliver. And that's what you get to. And that is what we need to get to with quantum for the future. And I'll come back to that in a moment. We have to think about it for the long term. It doesn't get past that challenge because it's been unsuccessful. It will dissipate. Okay, so bits and pieces might happen, but you will not secure a third phase. So that's our challenge. And that's also why you've got this increased emphasis on innovation as part of in the mix, and this requirement for private funding. The ICT research landscape, the port that EPSRC funds is only a subset of the overall landscape, and that's it. And that's not just talking about what currently comes through the EU, okay, through Horizon 2020 or any other framework program. These companies themselves invest in both, in some cases, quite basic research, and and they're certainly investing quite a lot in applied research. There's a whole innovation landscape out there. It's a small portion, and quantum has to head towards that situation. And it's starting to. I think we're starting to see it. But this is working. And the other side of that is that then allows that room, EPSRC will put in a baseline if it's successful, to actually start growing that as part of the national portfolio. It does have, these have implications on the portfolio. Okay. Now, when we talk about the future research programme that would be within that, I think it's been accepted as an ongoing need for a substantial research programme. If you flick back to this, it's still quite large, okay? It's still quite significant. In fact, it's not that dissimilar to where, once you add the capital into where we are now with the hub portfolio. And that's quite important to know. It's a change in balance rather than a declining, like a decline from one phase to the next. The area grows, and you see that. Some of you might think back to the photonics portfolio. Some of you maybe started in or continue to work in now. When I joined EPSRC in 2000, there used to be a joint photonics panel, special initiatives. That's the only way we could support photonics effectively. Couldn't survive in responsive mode. Okay, it just didn't survive. It was in normal panels. Okay, special initiatives. We used to put out what, £5 to £10 million a year. Now, even with inflation, even in terms of inflation. When I left ICT, we had a portfolio. There was a set of existing grants would have been maybe about £30 million of grants maximum. When I left ICT, we had a portfolio in excess of £150 million of grants. That's what happens when an area establishes itself. It grows like that. It's not a zero-sum game. Less research, more innovation. Actually, happens. The whole area starts to grow. Now, when we think about this situation, I think it's accepted that the primary delivery mechanism in the second phase should be hubs, certainly by the investments the national programme makes through this allocation. I think it's fair to say that we've all agreed that the existing hubs have established capabilities and expertise that should be built on. That we want to maintain some strategic flexibility in a second phase. But also that we actually have to think again about how we're not just getting to the end of the second phase, but what happens beyond it. And that's where we are. So we're actually starting. We're in the not in the middle, but we're sort of in the first part of a process to think about refining our whole portfolio. We're at the stage of identifying research priorities for those hubs that we should have. And then we'll relatively soon, have to move on to actually building consortia and identifying partners. But going back to that previous slide, one of the critical things here is that what do we want to keep from the first phase and build on, and what do we need to introduce that's new? I think it's better to let's pick a hub at random. Okay, so let's pick a hub at random. Let's pick the quantum communications hub. It's better, rather than thinking of it in terms of quantum communications hub as it's going like version 1 and then version 2, it's actually better to think about the version that we're going to have here. Okay? We don't yet know how much we're going to carry on, can afford and how much we're not. It could be a major refinement or it could be a minor refinement. We have not yet worked that through. And for some areas, that I personally think the level of change is more significant than others. Not necessarily in terms of the membership. It might actually, many of the existing members of hubs could still be in the second phase, but the ethos and the sort of the centre of gravity in terms of what they're doing could change first. And if you go, and also the other side of it is the interaction that they have with these other activities that we want to fund. You've heard talk about things like innovation centres, the balance in an area between a researcher and an innovation centre, what one does and what the other does. These are still questions we need to resolve. And we'll have to resolve them to some extent as we go along, because, and this is certainly my own view, frankly, we can't try and lay everything out in detail like a jigsaw and then slice it all up. Things are happening in real time as we go along. People having ideas about what we do. Frankly, we have to try try and put this programme together. But this is where we are now in one particular bit. Now, the reason EPSRC has started on this before we even know we've secured the money is several different aspects. The first aspect is that frankly we can't wait. Okay? To do this, to form these consortia, identify those priorities, form consortia, work out what we might want to fund, all needs to happen so that we don't have a hiatus between the first phase or an interruption to the first phase and the second phase. We can't afford the loss of momentum. We can't afford key members of the community to start getting concerned or itchy feet and jump ship. So we have to start that now. The other reason is that actually we don't know how much money we're going to get, but I think what we can say is whatever happens, EPSRC will try to make sure that it has a research portfolio in quantum technologies. So actually there is a minimum level EPSRC will try and support. I'm pretty confident about that. Having talked to Neil Viner and Phil Nelson, the current exec chair of EPSRC, and for that matter Tom Wadden, the deputy exec chair, actually they're all quite adamant that we have to have a portfolio going forward. How big it is another matter. What we do exactly is another matter. And that's why we're starting this now, way well ahead of time. So we're going through this process, and it's not an open competition in the normal in the way the first phase set was set up, the one we have now. But nor is it a straightforward renewal. It's somewhere awkwardly between the two. Okay, and I think that's the only way we can approach this without running the risk of throwing away things that we can't afford to throw away, or not enabling or facilitating the evolution of the portfolio that we need to have happen. And this will hopefully get us to a situation where we can actually make awards and confirm who's going to get what at least for what I would class as the minimum amount of time before the end of the current set. Actually, it's in sense. I saw somebody here earlier. I think the idea is that we actually get increasing confidence about who's going to be in, what's working in, as you get towards the final decision. And then finally, I think the other side of this is I think we do really need to look beyond the second phase. I think for EPSRC with the nuclear ion, and for that matter, my colleagues in the Innovate UK part of that, I think we do need to take quite a long-term view. I think that goes from everything like thinking about what we do about fellowships, and so the more observant of you may have noticed we haven't put a fellowship stream, a dedicated fellowship stream in that second phase. I think that's partly because it actually is incumbent on EPSRC deciding to sort that out. That's core business for EPSRC, irrespective of what the allocation is core business. Okay? I think that there will be a point where we have to start shifting between a very top-down managed portfolio, as we currently have, to a more mixed portfolio. We essentially at the moment have a situation where we are very top-down within the national programme, and then people manage to secure funding from other parts of EPSRC or Innovate UK, which is much more bottom-up in nature, and we probably want to balance those out a little bit and see it a bit more seamlessly. And finally, I think that there is this issue about maintaining it in the longer term. If we think about just that hubs, we think about research priorities for the next phase of hubs, but we probably do need to start thinking about even where we'll be at the end of the second phase. I know that's difficult, and you can't always have high confidence in your predictions or what you anticipate. You might have to abstract it up a little bit to get an idea, but I think we need to we'll have to start thinking about that before, much earlier than you probably initially realised. With that, that's the end of my slides. Happy to take any questions if we've got any time left.
That's great. So questions? Alex, the question I'd.
Thanks for that informative talk. I was wondering about you said there might be a call for people who are not currently involved in hubs who might want to get involved in hubs. Do you have a feeling for what that application process will entail?
Yeah, so what we're looking at the moment is a consortium type building process. So where we scope out what we want hubs to cover, or their outcomes that we want them to achieve. There might be some indications of the sorts of disciplines that we want to involve. We're having them. And then we're thinking in terms of a consortium building process for essentially the academic leadership of that hub. That would allow us to then facilitate that, and there are some reasons for doing it that way that I'll come on to, that will allow us to identify who should be in. Now that won't be every person that will be in the hub, and inevitably they might want to introduce more members to their consortium, and of course it certainly doesn't get down to RAs or very certainly first lecturers, I suspect. But it will allow us to carry through parts of the current membership of hubs if we need to, okay, because they'll be able to apply and they can explain why they should be in. And it will allow us to also introduce new members. Now, the thing is that this process actually will be, in some ways, is quite awkward and sensitive. There's no way around that. We'll have to think quite carefully about how you do this, and it's quite a careful assessment process to do it. But what it does have some advantages. It has advantages that with the existing clubs, it helps them be introduced to people they may not already know about, okay, which is what's possible. And also it helps facilitate the removal or the reduction in the activity of people currently in without everybody falling out. Okay, because the decision is taken actually above the current club membership, and also that already everyone else in the community for that matter. So that's the sort of person. We haven't nailed everything at the moment, but it would be, you could imagine it being a bit like a situation when people attend workshops or sandpits. It's not quite identical to that, and it will be a bit more constrained in the sense that we might be make very clear statements about the sort of expertise that we want to be in. You can imagine that in certain cases that might basically essentially name people. We won't name people, but you might be down to literally you know which two it is.
Okay, that's it.
More questions?
Hi, thanks, Liam. I noticed you had training as one of the slices of the hub. And I noticed that you mentioned CDT, the Quantum Tech priority. But I think it was in the priority, it mentioned that there wasn't a plan to expand the kind of number of CDTs in Quantum Tech. And I'm just wondering if this training might be like the skills call that came
Well,
out.
yeah, I mean, I think that hasn't. I'm looking at colleagues on the audience now. I think it's fair to say we've not ironed out everything, exactly what we would do with skills and training in the second phase. And I think probably between us, I think we've got some ideas that are evolutions of where we are now. But most of that has been what we might want to do more in PhD level training. Okay. What we haven't really explored is what we might do that isn't PhD level training. It's a very different situation. So that's why EPSRC. So EPSRC had to basically make a decision, and because it was the timescale of its call, we don't know whether we're going to get additional funding for quantum. So we said, look, we are going to have something in our CDT portfolio. That is what we, out of our baseline, think that we can afford to do. Should do. That's why we're in that situation.
Thanks.
Question at the back, Chris.
For about a year, you're going to have a unique bit of leverage. Have you or could you think about, with the second program and awarding things, having some conditions on universities to get funding, also having to ease the constraints on spinning out technology, which we touched on at this point, that it's difficult to get tech out of universities. That's a leverage right now that you could consider making that part of the accepting awards, easing that process.
Okay, we'll think about that. I'm not going to commit, and we haven't discussed this at all as partners. But that's interesting to think about. I don't know if anybody here has a comment. So.
I mean, one thing I would say is that completely separate to this, UKRI is starting to look at all its commercialisation pathways as well. So at the moment it's in the process of an audit, but there's an overarching look at commercialisation in general. So in all honesty, I think the difficulties of getting a university to change its entire IP and spinning out policies based on a single program is probably unlikely. I mean, but I think it's more likely to be an overarching look at how commercialisation activity and schemes such as this work. And so we've talked all about quantum today. There's a lot of other fishes in the sea. So there's a big fellowships program, for example, which has just been launched, which is as equal to open to quantum as it is anything else. So there's lots of other things around UKRI. And there is more money going into UKRI. That's kind of the other thing. We've talked about quantum. I mean, this is a general R&D uplift. And I think it's down to all of us to show if we do multidisciplinary work and we show it transforms into innovation and really exciting work, then we get a bigger slice of that pie. So there is more money to aim for in both pots, both in terms of innovation and in terms of research. And I think we just have to be creative and compliant in the way we work with those schools. Do you want to?
Yeah, let me add to what Chris just said. In phase one, we struggled with this one already. And it was hard enough to get a single point NDA so that a company could work with several universities, and we struggled with that one. But it's not impossible. So, for example, the chip scale clock work that we sponsor, which has gone out to industry did not have to do a lot of work with the 4 universities that were involved in that. So we are working on it at the moment, and in fact the intellectual property part of BASE is actually seriously looking at this at the moment. There's nothing definitive on it, but we do feel that at the moment we've got a rather clunky system and we can do better.
Okay, question at the back from Rusty.
Hi, Liam. Sorry, I'm struggling to add up the totals on the bar chart. What was the overall budget figure?
So the current the case that's gone in is 338 million total. Okay, for the public funding.
And do you expect what percentage of that do you think would be a good outcome?
338.
I'll reword my question. A likely outcome.
I think we'll get 338.
Sure.
I do. Right now, I do. Yeah.
Do you remember we bid for 270 million at the beginning?
Okay.
The current program is just over 400. Sorry, we're recording this bloody thing. We bid for 270 million at the start. The current program, including all of the investment by all of the partners, is 405 million at the moment in phase one. So what we bid for at the beginning, you should always regard as a seed, because the other partners will invest as well.
The only thing I would say, I think we'll get 338 million. If we don't get 338 million, we'll get lower. I think it's because some of this here, funding, the decision will be deferred. And actually, if the program goes well, then it could actually total in that time frame have more than 338 million. Because I think it's things that I think actually we'd be able to top a little bit to build up later. It's interesting already if you look at the overall ISCF competitions. There's a 20 million pioneer competition for quantum. But you can actually look at some of the others and start to see opportunities for people doing quantum technology to bid into other competitions. So it partly depends how you do your counting here, but I think I'm quite confident that we'll land this.
Any more questions? One more from Chris.
Sorry, one more. The one thing that was slightly missing from the first phase of the program was other, so international. How can you see, especially when you think of the innovation centers, this could be crucial. I appreciate the wrinkles of trying to dole out money outside the UK, but how would you bring in international players to the program?
So it's a good question. Well, there are different options for that. So we could hold some money back in any of these streams for that matter to actually organise bilaterals or multilateral arrangements. We could even delegate some of that responsibility to people that we give awards out to already. If I look at if you look at quantum computing, for example, so let's say we have quantum computing. Do we want to have some collaboration with the efforts that are going on overseas or in companies? So Google, IBM, Microsoft. Do we want to do that? If we do, how would we do that? Would that be best done by having a bilateral, or would that be by actually making it part of the responsibility of the hub in that area that would pursue that? Maybe to help risk assure the UK if that thing takes off, or even just to get benefited from it before, well, that's actually the lead effort. Okay. I don't have a firm answer to that. I think that's the sort of thing we have to actually resolve.